Hey, you want to hear one of my famous controversial theories? In the late 19th century, the Impressionist movement was sweeping through classical music, especially in France, with Debussy and Ravel being the most popular of these composers. Meanwhile, across the ocean in New Orleans, you arguably have more freed slaves than you have white people, and more than 50% of the population speaks French fluently. So it is safe to assume that the Impressionist movement was alive and well there. It's also safe to say that the black population in the South was exposed quite a bit to this, and they also had their inspiration of rhythm that had evolved into Vodou culture at the time. All of a sudden, the popularity of classical music goes way down, and the popularity of this new music, the devil's music, jazz, is born. It's all created on the same instruments, but instead of bowing the double bass, we're now plucking it. I know what you're thinking. Do not get confused. The dangerous music coming from black people in this era is called jazz. It is not the fascinating evolution of classical music. It's jazz. Classical, jazz. Classical, jazz. Classical, jazz. Until finally, a long time later, jazz is universally accepted by just about everyone. In my opinion, jazz is 21st century classical music. The only reason that distinction is being made is because there were a lot of really shitty distinctions being made at the time. And now we're all just confused. If I write a piano song that has a logical progression like Mozart, and then it takes a dangerous left turn like Coltrane, then did my classical song just become jazz? Did I compose the song wrong? How the hell will iTunes deal with it, since they have two entirely different submission systems for classical and jazz? So okay, maybe jazz is 21st century classical music, and it's a pointless distinction. Who cares? Well, anybody who played jazz before it became acceptable. Jazz, for a really long time, was only allowed in brothels or in bars during Prohibition. People were arrested and went to jail for violating a law saying that they could not perform jazz in public. In America, seriously. Outside of music class and just in history, we're taught that the most notable composers are Bach, Mozart, and Beethoven, who are all great. But what about Coltrane? If you're only looking at music theory, the innovation that John Coltrane is responsible for makes Beethoven nearly irrelevant if you're going to have a short list. Here I am, publicly shitting on Beethoven. That'll get me a good affiliate sponsorship. My point being, classical music did not lose popularity or go underground in the 20th century. It just evolved in a color that we didn't like at the time. And that was the reason why, while Gershwin was a highly acclaimed classical composer, Louis Armstrong was playing in brothels.